crucial frameworks, the profound insights, and the blueprints for a better life, and distill them into actionable, essential knowledge for you.
Today, we're tackling a concept that is, I think, far more challenging than just routine self-improvement. We are looking at that moment, that inflection point, when you realize that the foundation of your current life and your identity is, well, it's unstable.
Maybe even toxic.
Perhaps even toxic, and that minor repairs, they just aren't going to cut it anymore. We are talking about radical self-reinvention.
That moment when change becomes a necessity, not just a wish or a New Year's resolution. And our source material today provides this almost architectural approach to the process. It's titled, Destroy the Old You, Rebuild from Zero.
And this isn't about tweaking your morning routine or, trying a new productivity app.
Yeah.
This is advocating for a full-scale emotional demolition, which is then followed by a very deliberate, conscious construction.
So for you, the listener, who maybe has reached that point of just profound dissatisfaction, our mission today is to follow this blueprint exactly. We're going to guide you from that initial, quiet moment of realization all the way through the disruption and emotional clearance.
And then into the precise architecture you need to build 3 foundational systems. And those are mind, discipline, and purpose.
It's a journey that is structured, it's definitely challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding. It provides a pathway to set aside the person you were, who was built, as the source says, largely out of survival.
Right.
And to intentionally design the person you are meant to become, built for genuine growth and ultimately fulfillment. So let's jump right in by looking at the hard part first, recognizing that the old structure has to come down.
And that brings us to our first major concept, what the source calls the necessity of demolition. It begins by detailing this moment of realization. And, people often anticipate this as some huge external rock bottom event.
It's like a layoff, a big breakup, some kind of crisis.
Exactly. But the framework here suggests it's often much, much quieter than that.
That's what I found so fascinating about this part. It describes the beginning as subtle, almost unexpected. It's not necessarily when the whole house collapses, but it's that moment when you're standing inside it and you just quietly realize, I hate being here.
It's a feeling of internal dissonance.
Yeah.
You could be outwardly successful, you could have all the boxes ticked, but internally, there's just this persistent low-grade hum of dissatisfaction.
Right.
It's that quiet acknowledgement that even though you've tried the minor fixes, a new hobby, a different diet, whatever, you are still running the same psychological programming.
Right.
And things they fundamentally cannot continue as they are. That realization is the very first step.
And the framework really emphasizes that awareness is the beginning of rebirth. But,
Right.
True awareness requires a kind of brutal honesty, doesn't it? We spend so much energy preserving this comfortable half-lie that allows us to function day to day.
Absolutely. There's a pivotal line in the source that defines this stage perfectly. It says, transformation begins the moment you stop lying to yourself.
Wow.
If you're lying about the integrity of your relationships or the true level of your physical health or your genuine engagement with your work, you are actively sustaining the very structure that needs to be demolished.
So that quiet realization is just the truth finally breaking through all those defensive layers of avoidance we've built up.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how the source reframes dissatisfaction itself. It argues that chronic dissatisfaction is explicitly a signal of impending growth. It's not a weakness. It's not some kind of character flaw.
We're so conditioned to suppress that feeling, right?
Yeah.
To treat it like a defect. I shouldn't feel this way.
We are. But if you are chronically unhappy with where you are, it just means your inner evolution is outstripping your current external systems, that feeling. It's the internal alarm clock signaling that the old shell is now too small. It's energy.
And it needs to be channeled into action, not suppressed with comfort or distraction.
Precisely. So once that signal is acknowledged, the next move is defined in terms of disruption. The framework title says it all. Destroy the old you. You can't evolve while you're still clinging to the habits and patterns that keep you static. Comfort, in this context, is the enemy of growth.
Okay, and this is where it gets really actionable. This is where you, the listener, can start to do the work. The source provides 3 specific exercises to break that shell and force disruption. This is how you move from just a mental realization to, physical action.
Yeah, these are not passive exercises. They require some serious introspection.
Let's unpack them. The first one is to identify 3 specific anchor habits that induce stagnation. So what exactly does the framework mean by an anchor habit?
It's a great question because it's not what we typically think of as a bad habit. These are the rituals, often invisible to us, that guarantee structural stability in your current limited life. They are the reliable patterns that ensure you won't change.
So not something obvious like smoking. It's more subtle.
Much more subtle. Think of the specific ritual of your afternoon coffee break that must include the phone and a 20-minute doom scroll every single day. Or maybe it's the immediate response you have when you face a task you think is too hard, which is always procrastination through cleaning or organizing something.
So it's the small, comforting mechanisms that prevent risk-taking or deep work. Identifying them means you literally have to map out the exact machinery of your own stagnation.
Yes. And breaking the shell means identifying those routines that guarantee you stay exactly where you are, no matter what your stated goals are.
Right.
And once you identify them, the task is to intentionally disrupt them. You don't even have to replace them yet. Just break the rhythm. Introduce a little chaos into that routine of stagnation.
Okay, that's powerful. The second exercise is to list the fears that currently control your decisions. This one requires a ton of honesty about your real motivations. We so often cloak fear-based decisions in the language of prudence or realism.
Fear, in that old identity, is the primary control mechanism. It's the governor on the engine. It dictates whether you apply for that challenging job. That's fear of failure. Or whether you have that difficult conversation, fear of rejection.
Or even whether you invest in yourself, which could be a fear of wasting money or not being worthy of it.
Exactly. Fear creates the psychological boundaries of the old you. So to demolish that structure, you have to first map the boundaries it was built within. The exercise is to list the fears, and for each one, identify a major life decision it has dictated in the last year.
That's a serious audit. And the third exercise, writing down the truths the individual actively avoids confronting. That sounds like the ultimate demolition charge.
It is. It's the deepest cut, and it's often the most painful. This is where that self-lie we talked about is formalized and confronted head-on. These truths are things that, if you truly acknowledge them, would require immediate radical action.
Like realizing a key relationship is fundamentally corrosive.
Or that your professional ladder is leaning against the entirely wrong building. Confronting this truth, actually writing it down, reading it, owning it, that releases the energy you need for the demolition. You are literally pulling the structural supports out from under the old self's illusion.
So once that disruption is underway, we move into the actual emotional heart of the process, destroying the old identity. This is chapter 3, the emotional demolition phase. We've identified the structure, now we're taking the hammer to it.
And this is the phase that requires a deep psychological commitment. The core principle is that to become new, the old identity has to be willingly released. You have to acknowledge the death of who you were.
You can't carry it with you.
You can't. Trying to carry the old identity into the new structure is like trying to build a modern skyscraper on top of a crumbling medieval foundation. It's guaranteed to fail.
And why is that old identity so tenacious? The framework gives us a really powerful insight here. The old self is a product of survival, not intended for growth.
This changes everything. That anxious, procrastinating, fearful, limited version of yourself. It wasn't built to thrive in your current environment. It was built to keep you safe from perceived threats based on your past trauma or childhood conditioning.
It's a defense mechanism.
It was a perfectly functional defense mechanism designed for maximum risk avoidance. A survival mechanism cannot lead a life of thriving and expansion. It served its purpose, but now it has to be, let's say, honorably retired.
So the demolition has to address this psychological structure directly. The framework lists 2 vital, interconnected steps here. The first one is, you must forgive yourself for who you were.
Self-forgiveness is the act of dropping the psychological chains of past mistakes and regrets. If you enter this rebuild phase still carrying resentment for your past self, that negative baggage will immediately corrupt the new foundation.
It's like building with toxic materials.
It is. You have to grant grace to that old self, recognizing it did the best it could with the limited tools and awareness it had at the time. This forgiveness is what stops that negative self-recrimination loop that defined the old structure.
And the second step is to release identities that were built from past pain and external expectation. This feels like clearing the rubble of other people's definitions of you.
This is absolutely critical for achieving clarity. Think about the identities you wear that were given to you, not chosen by you.
Yeah.
The dutiful child, the reliable martyr, the family peacekeeper, or maybe the scared perfectionist.
Roles we play.
Roles we were often forced into to satisfy external demands or as coping mechanisms against pain. Releasing them means consciously stepping out of those roles. You are clearing the psychological field so the new structure can be built on ground zero, unburdened by borrowed purpose or painful history.
Okay, so we have officially cleared the foundations. We've acknowledged the necessity of the demolition, and we've executed the emotional clearance. That leads us perfectly into section 2. Starting from zero, the power of potential. And this is really the philosophical crux of the whole construction phase.
It is, because most people equate hitting rock bottom or starting over with failure, loss, or emptiness. It's seen as a place of deficiency. But the source explicitly redefines zero.
And this reframe is so powerful. Zero is not emptiness or failure. It is pure potential. That single idea is probably the most psychologically liberating concept in this entire process.
It fundamentally changes the emotional valence of the whole exercise. If zero is potential, it means you have infinite possibilities without the psychological weight of your own historical data. You're not carrying the expectation of past failures into it.
You aren't inheriting limitations.
None. It's a blank, creative canvas, a point of pure energy.
And that concept, the freedom of the blank slate, is what eliminates the fear and doubt that were inherited from the old self. You aren't trying to patch up a damaged machine. You are building a new, optimized system from scratch.
And that perspective is essential because the old self was defined by its constraints, right? Its I can't narratives. The new self has to be defined solely by potential and possibility. This requires an immediate shift into what the Force calls the zero mindset principles. This is the operational philosophy for the rebuild.
Let's get into those. The first principle, start with belief, not baggage.
Baggage is that accumulation of past mistakes, regrets, self-recriminations. It's the history that told the old self why it shouldn't even bother trying. Belief here isn't blind faith. It's the active, forward-looking conviction that the blank slate offers a better, achievable future.
So it's a conscious choice.
It's an active, conscious choice you have to make every single morning to privilege future possibility over past precedent. You leave the history of failure behind. It's just no longer relevant data for the new identity you're building.
I love that. The second principle is radical accountability. Replace excuses with accountability. This is where the rubber really meets the road.
Absolutely. When you truly embrace the blank slate, you also have to embrace total ownership. Excuses are relics of the old identity. They were protective mechanisms to shield that fragile ego from the consequences of inaction.
Blaming circumstances, other people.
All of it. Accountability, on the other hand, recognizes that from this point forward, every single outcome, positive or negative, is a direct result of the systems you design and execute. There is no external factor to blame. You are the architect and the builder.
And the third principle is what truly distinguishes this approach from a lot of the fluffy self-help out there. Focus on systems, not motivation.
This is the cornerstone of structural and lasting change. Motivation is fickle. It's an emotion. It depends on your mood, the weather, how well you slept, some external stimulus. It is completely unreliable fuel.
We've all been there. Fired up one day, can't get out of bed the next.
Of course. Systems, on the other hand, are structural. They are routines, processes, and boundaries that guarantee output regardless of how you feel. When you rebuild, you build systematic consistency, not emotional highs. If you rely on motivation, your rebuild stops the very first time you feel tired. If you rely on the system just runs automatically.
That is the key differentiator. Motivation gets you started, but the system keeps you moving. So now that we have the mindset, we can move into section 3. The 3 pillars of reconstruction mind, discipline, and purpose. This is the actual blueprint for the construction phase.
Right. And Chapter 5 addresses Pillar 1, rebuilding the mind as the foundation. If the mind remains tethered to those old, chaotic, reactive ways of thinking, the entire structure you build on top of it will eventually collapse under psychological pressure. The mind has to be optimized first.
The source introduces the foundational tools for this mental reconstruction as discipline, clarity, and purpose. But let's look closer at the specific ongoing strategies for mental rebuilding. What are they?
Okay, so first, daily reflection and journaling. And this is not just a diary of what happened. It's a rigorous tool for self-awareness maintenance. The goal is to catch the reemergence of old limiting beliefs or those unconscious stagnant habits before they can embed themselves back into the new structure.
So it's a continuous self-audit.
It's a continuous self-audit to monitor the integrity of your thought patterns. You check in. Was my reaction today driven by the old survival self or by the new intentional self?
It's like the daily structural inspection for the new building. And this self-awareness directly enables the second strategy, building micro habits that compound over time.
Yes, and the framework is really wise here. It acknowledges that demanding huge leaps often fails because motivation just runs out. Micro-habits are the bricks and mortar of the new identity. They are small, consistent actions like 2 push-ups or writing 1 sentence or reading 2 pages.
The bar is so low you can't fail.
Exactly. The power isn't in the size of the task itself, but in the psychological proof it provides to you.
Okay, so when I do that tiny little micro-habit, what's the psychological effect? What's happening in my brain?
You are proving to yourself, consistently, that you are a person who keeps their commitments. When you maintain a tiny commitment every single day, that psychological proof compounds into confidence for larger changes. You're building what we call an integrity loop. Each successful micro-habit reinforces the belief. I am reliable. I am capable. I am a person of action.
So it systematically dismantles the old self's narrative that you're failure or you can't stick with anything.
It directly attacks that narrative with cold, hard evidence. And that leads to the third strategy, which is the systematic necessity of reprogramming the limiting beliefs you inherited from the old self.
So you have to actively restructure your thoughts.
You do. It requires active cognitive restructuring. You identified these toxic narratives during the demolition phase. Those old thoughts that said, I am incapable, I will always fail, or I'm defined by my past. Now, you systematically replace them. You don't just ignore the old belief. You actively use your system of micro-habits as evidence to counter it.
So if the old voice says you can never stick to anything,
The new self replies, I have written 1 sentence every day for the last 90 days. I am a consistent writer. The evidence proves otherwise. You're replacing an old story with new data.
that's incredibly practical. Okay, moving on to Chapter 6, Pillar 2. Cultivating discipline as a lifestyle. This feels like the engine room, directly applying that systems versus motivation principle.
It is. And the challenge here is very direct. Success is not created by inspiration. It is built through relentless consistency. Discipline is the engine that keeps the system running. Whether or not you feel like showing up that day, it's about externalizing the effort so it just becomes routine.
The most profound insight here, and one I think our listener audience should really pay close attention to, is the focus on identity-based habits.
This is the ultimate connection between the rebuilt mind and the required actions. It shifts the focus from what I want to achieve to who I am becoming. You connect your habits directly to the new desired identity.
So instead of saying, I have to exercise today, which is task-based,
Right, that feels like a chore. Instead, you internalize, I am an athletic, healthy person. The workout becomes non-negotiable because skipping it would constitute a psychological threat to the entire identity you are so carefully building.
so if the action confirms the identity, then the omission of the action negates the identity. It raises the stakes psychologically.
Precisely. The system of self-integrity becomes its own enforcing mechanism. If you skip a habit, you are sending a signal to your subconscious that you are not the person you claim to be, which immediately opens the door for the old survival self to creep back in. Consistency is what validates the new self.
And maintaining this level of consistency requires emotional resilience. The source talks about the capacity to stay consistent even when things go wrong, when internal or external factors challenge the routine.
And setbacks are guaranteed. They will happen. Emotional resilience means viewing a missed day, a lapse, or a momentary failure, not as a catastrophic signal that means you should quit the whole system, which is what the old self would do.
Right, the all or nothing thinking.
Exactly. Instead, you see it as a simple data point that requires an immediate correction. The commitment is to this system of consistency, not to a perfect unbroken track record. You just reset immediately, minimizing the deviation without all the emotional drama and self-flagellation that characterize the old identity.
And finally, under discipline, there's the strategic power of routine in cementing it all. Routine removes decision-making friction.
That's the key. When you build a robust routine, a morning routine, a deep work routine, you conserve mental energy, what some people call ego strength. The critical decisions, when to wake up, when to work out, when to focus, they're all automated.
You don't have to argue with yourself every morning.
If you have to fight yourself every single morning over that first step, you are wasting the precious cognitive capacity you need for creative problem solving later in the day. Routine is the armor of discipline because it turns effortful tasks into non-negotiable defaults.
Okay, so we have the mind rebuilt and the discipline established as the engine. But if the engine is running without a destination, you're just burning fuel for nothing. So Chapter 7 brings us to Pillar 3, rebuilding the purpose, the compass.
And the source correctly identifies the severe danger of discipline without direction. Without purpose, all that consistency can start to feel really empty. You might be the most consistent person in the world, but if you don't know why you're doing it, you will eventually experience burnout or existential dread.
Purpose is the compass.
It's the necessary compass that validates the massive effort you've put into this entire rebuilding process.
And the framework provides a clear, actionable purpose framework, which starts with an inventory of your current values.
This is what grounds the purpose in authenticity. You have to start by asking, what do I value right now? Not what society tells you you should value, but what genuinely drives you. If you value intellectual freedom or creative output or profound connection, your purpose has to reflect those core values.
Because if it's built on something external, like financial success for its own sake, it won't be sustainable. It won't sustain the decades of effort that a meaningful life requires.
So the second question defines the destination. What specific future do you want to create? This moves the focus from vague desires to a concrete visualization.
Specificity here is absolutely critical. Your mind needs a clear target to guide the systems you're building. A fuzzy goal will always result in fuzzy execution. If your desired future involves being a recognized leader in a niche field or creating a specific quality of life for your family, the purpose has to point directly there. This requires articulating that future in detail, seeing the systems running perfectly in that future state.
And the third question is the one that connects all three pillars together. What kind of person must I become to achieve that desired future? This is the integration point. Purpose isn't just an external outcome. It's an internal measure of who you need to evolve into. If your purpose requires resilience, intellectual curiosity, and extreme focus, then your identity-based habits, your entire system of discipline, must be built around becoming that focused, resilient, curious person.
So the purpose drives the identity, and the identity drives the habits. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop that's designed for growth. Okay, so we've demolished the old, we've embraced zero, and we've built the three pillars. That leads us into the final section, Section 4, becoming and maintaining the new identity. Chapter 8 focuses on defining that massive transformation.
This is the point where the systems achieve a kind of escape velocity. Stepping fully into the identity that has been rebuilt means the new self is now the default operating system, not the aspirational one you're striving for. The new way of responding and living just feels natural, maybe even comfortable.
And the source gives us 3 measurable psychological signs that the transformation has successfully occurred. The first one is, you consistently choose growth over immediate comfort.
Immediate comfort is the siren song of the old survival self. That old structure was built entirely around minimizing pain and maximizing comfort. The new identity, which is built for growth, recognizes that discomfort is the prerequisite for expansion.
So when you choose the difficult, high-yield task over the easy distraction.
That means the new self has psychological dominance. You are actively seeking productive friction.
Okay, the second sign. You respond thoughtfully to situations rather than reacting impulsively.
This is such a beautiful indication that the rebuilt mind and discipline are functioning perfectly. The old self, built on pain, was highly reactive. It was always triggering fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms based on old data.
Old wounds.
Yeah. The rebuilt mind has created a crucial buffer zone. You now have the bandwidth to pause, process the data, consult your purpose, and choose a response that aligns with your values, rather than instantly defaulting to an emotional reflex. This is true freedom from the past.
And the third sign, which I think is the most profound psychological shift, you no longer fear the prospect of starting again.
This shows complete psychological flexibility and resilience. If your identity is defined by the systems you run, then failure in an external endeavor is not a personal failure. It's merely a data point that requires you to iterate your system.
The fear of zero is gone.
It's gone because you know now that zero is pure potential, and you possess the proven blueprint mind, discipline, and purpose to build again, efficiently and quickly. You trust the process of construction itself, not any single outcome.
That is resilience defined. And Chapter 9 reminds us that this is not a finish line. The journey continues. Rebuilding is a lifelong process, not a destination.
This is the mistake so many people make after a successful rebuild. They assume the maintenance is automatic, but the inertia of stagnation is powerful. If you stop tending the system, those old patterns, which are deeply ingrained neural pathways, they will start to creep back in. This phase is all about vigilance without paranoia.
So what are the long-term practices for maintenance? The source lists 3 essential steps. First, a regular self-audit, checking your alignment and systems.
This is a formalized version of that daily reflection, just expanded to a broader scale, maybe weekly or monthly. It's asking the hard questions. Are my anchor habits reemerging? Are my actions still truly aligned with the purpose framework I defined? Have my micro habits become so routine that they no longer provide psychological proof and maybe need to be leveled up?
So you have to continually adjust the architecture for optimal performance.
Constantly. The second practice is continuous learning, feeding the new, growth-oriented mind.
Right, because the new identity thrives on novelty and expansion.
It does. Continuous learning ensures the mind remains a dynamic foundation, open to new data, new skills, new capabilities. Stagnation always begins the moment intellectual curiosity ends. You have to actively seek out challenges and new inputs to prevent the system from settling into a comfortable rigidity.
And finally, staying aligned with the defined purpose, regularly consulting that compass.
Because the purpose is not static, and it shouldn't be. Life changes, your values shift, goals are achieved. Regular consultation ensures that if the destination needs adjustment, the systems are flexible enough to pivot without requiring another full-scale demolition. It's an ongoing dialogue with your future self, ensuring the present architecture is still serving the long-term vision.
That brings us to the conclusion of the source, which is really just a powerful summary of this entire process. The old you is gone, and the new you is rising, built with intention, with strength, and with clarity. This deep dive and the blueprint itself is merely the beginning of the rebirth process.
It is such an empowering philosophy, but it is also very demanding. It tells you that you are not defined by your past, but by the intentional systems you build in the present. The psychological labor is in accepting the necessity of demolition first, and then moving into that radical accountability where every part of your new life is a conscious choice.
Absolutely. Let's just synthesize this whole cycle for our listener, mapping the journey we just took through the source material. We started with that internal recognition that radical change has to happen now, and that's a signal of growth, not failure.
And that realization led to the uncomfortable but absolutely essential emotional demolition. Mapping the fears and truths, forgiving that survival-based past self, and clearing out the rubble of borrowed identities.
We then embraced the mindset that 0 equals pure potential, setting aside the past baggage in favor of radical accountability and focusing relentlessly on robust systems over fleeting motivation.
And finally, the systematic rebuilding of the 3 pillars. The foundational mind, through reflection and microhabits, the engine of discipline, through identity-based consistency, and the compass of purpose, defining your values and the necessary future self.
The core takeaway is crystal clear for you. The blueprint is provided, but the hard work lies in the execution of that accountability. You are no longer waiting for inspiration. You are relying on architecture.
And this framework is so strong because it provides a mechanism for growth that doesn't rely on toxic positivity. It acknowledges the emotional weight of self-change while providing a structured, engineered approach to construction that guarantees output.
But it does raise a really interesting question, one we should probably leave our listener to ponder as they embark on this process. The source heavily emphasizes the destruction of identities built from past pain and external expectation. And the new identity is built purely on systems and purpose.
Right, so if that new identity is so thoroughly structured, what challenges might arise years down the line when the purpose inevitably shifts or is maybe fully achieved? How does a deeply structured person handle the necessary destruction of the new structure they've worked so hard to build?
Exactly. How do you maintain the initial psychological freedom of 0, that psychological flexibility, when your new powerful systems create their own powerful structure and their own inertia? The very rigidity that provided stability initially could eventually become a new, harder-to-break form of stagnation.
It's the ultimate paradox of building for flexibility, isn't it? You need systems, but the systems themselves have to be designed for eventual modification or even complete replacement without collapsing the entire psychological infrastructure.
That's that continuous self-audit in action, always ensuring your structure remains a home and not a prison.
That's a great way to put it.
Food for thought as you execute your own blueprint. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into radical self-reinvention. We hope this exploration of destruction, 0, and purposeful construction gives you the clarity you need to start building today.
Until next time, keep digging into the sources and keep building your future self with intention, system by system.